Hey, I'm going to try this. I'm going to start a poll. I'm going to let you guys weigh in on this. Maybe just a second. My first poll I've ever done. Okay, I'm going to share this really quickly. Hello, Ashley. Let's see. Share this in the group really quickly. It's a crazy week. Tis a crazy week this week. My days are all mixed up. Like it literally feels like a Monday to me. I don't know why. Come on. Maybe I'm going to post it. I'm excited about today, though. I really wanted to get to it just because it was something that's very interesting to me. And this book is just so, so good. So I really wanted to get to it today or this week, rather. There we go. Okay, so we're posting that in the group. Done. Okay. So now I can get on to it. I absolutely love book reviews. This is one of my favorite things to do, obviously, because number one, I love to read. And I just really enjoy recommending books that I like, even just going over books that I didn't like when I was reviewing them. So if you guys have any suggestions for different books that maybe you're interested in, maybe you've seen, go ahead and leave them down in the comments and I'll get it on Kindle. I'll get it somewhere. But some of the best books are ones that I just kind of stumble across on myself. And this is one of them. It's called The Forgotten Principle in Child Rearing by Dan Johnson. And really, I did not know anything about Dan Johnson other than his bio on the back. But looking at his website, I found out that all of his, he is a missionary. He was a missionary to Brazil since 1974. So almost 50 years, over 50 years. And all of his children, come to find out, all of his children are also serving the Lord. I think he had 5. All 4 sons are in full-time Christian service as missionaries. And then 3 of their sons are serving in various parts of Brazil. And 1 son serves the Lord in the United States. Their daughter serves in the deaf department of her local church. So they have the product that I want. They have the fruit. Their lives have shown the fruit that I want. And so I'm going to first start this off by saying, as with anything in life, don't follow someone or listen to someone's advice who has fruit that you don't want. If you look at someone's life and their children, your children are the fruit of the teaching in your home. Obviously, your children are the fruit of your teaching on the home. Your marriage is the fruit of, what you're teaching on marriage. So if you look at someone's life and they have fruit that you absolutely do not want, I don't understand why you would follow that advice. Okay. So I only follow people in life whose teaching produces what I want in my own life, whether that is their marriage reflects what I want in my marriage, their child rearing reflects what I want, how I want to raise my children, and, whatever product they have. So we don't have to take everyone's advice. And so I often just examine the fruit of those whose advice I am willing to take. Beware of the parents or the people teaching a marriage whose advice is completely over the top. When I say over the top, I mean, you've never heard it before. It's kind of seems hardcore. They take things to the extreme, whether that is extreme teaching on the home in any area, extreme teaching on marriage, extreme teaching on, child rearing. What do I mean by extreme? Well, anything that's usually our spirit can tell, right? And examine the spirit behind it. So if their go-to is just beat, discipline, 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 their children, but yet they're raising bitter, angry children, watch out for that. Watch out for that. Be very careful about following that advice because there are other tools in your toolbox. And I just left a comment about this in the Gently Led Sisters group today. There are sometimes you don't have to that just be your first go-to, when it comes to rearing children. And that is why I love this book. It's like this man took everything that I am trying to get across on Gently Led Sisters, and he put it in this little booklet form. And it's a very small book. It's only 114 pages, and it's, not a super big book. And it's just very, very simple. But the advice given in this book, and I'm going to say I was skeptical when I first picked it up. So I stumbled across this at a ladies' retreat a few weeks ago, about a month ago. Yeah. And I stumbled across it, and I just kind of was just flipping through it. And I was like, oh, this is going to be another one of those books where it's just like, you just train little robots, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, I'm going to get it and I'm going to review it for my channel. So I got it. And from the time I started the first page, I was hooked. And I was like, this is nothing like I thought it was going to be. And this is like he took all of what's in my heart when it comes to raising children and put it in this book. Like every little thing, he put it in this book. So I wish I could just sit here and just read the whole thing, especially if you're an auditory listener. I'm more of a visual, which is why I like having it in book form. But I wish I could just take everything and just read the whole thing. But in the table of contents, he has foundational truth, you need the Lord, the forgotten ingredient, win and keep their hearts, the first pillar, right discipline, the second pillar, right love, the third pillar, right attitude, and the fourth pillar, right example. So that's it. Just six little chapters. That's it. And it's just packed full of so much wisdom. And one thing I liked about it too, which I'll get to it, is that there was a little practical evaluation. And you could see I filled it out. So you can do this with each kid. You could write it down on another page or something. You could do it for each kid and kind of go through and see what you score. But I just did, let's say, my oldest son. Okay, so I went through and I evaluated it. And when we get to that part, I'll kind of show what the questions were and the answers. And then I'll go over what my son scored, what my relationship score was with my son. So he says, I'm just going to start with it. The idea of this book was born when my family was all together one day in 1998. My children suggested I write a book about my life. At first, I totally rejected the idea, but with their continual insistence, I decided to give it a try. After years of prodding and pushing and a few changes of direction, the How I Did It book is the result. It is a story of how to rear children who want to serve the Lord. I think we all desire that, especially the ones watching my channel. Before entering, and this is underlined so much in this book because this is my main goal. That's why I said I was hooked from the time I started reading it, because it's like I had the same heart as this man. Before entering the ministry, I decided that one emphasis of my ministry would be my family. I had heard of great men of God, past and present, who had built wonderful ministries but had lost their family. A friend of mine who grew up with me in church had a thriving, exciting church in which he buried his life, only to lose his wife to another man. He admitted that he had neglected his wife and had invested too much time in the ministry. I did not want something similar to happen to my family. Because of this incident and others like it, and this is my heart right here, my family became a top priority in my life. And I put 100% by that because that is my top priority. God gave me the privilege of rearing 5 wonderful kids for the Lord. And then he goes on to talk about them a little bit. Not an easy task. Rearing children takes work and dedication, but the rewards are far beyond our imagination. Such wonderful memories, joys, and happiness we have because of our children. My children are not perfect, for I was not perfect, but you do not need to be perfect. Thank the Lord to rear your children in the way they should go. And I love that he says this because there's this philosophy out there that even if you're a perfect parent, you can't raise good kids. And that's so false because there are no perfect parents. But yet there are perfectly imperfect people raising good kids. So, there is no, you don't have to be a perfect parent to raise good kids. And I think this little book tells you all the missing things maybe that you've been looking for. Like, how do I do it? Right. So he starts getting into it. Obviously, the first foundational truth was that you need the Lord. Um, Christians must live to please the Lord in all their ways. His will needs to be their will. If Christians are not trying to please the Lord with their ways, how can they expect God to help them? And then he talks about how God must do the work. Children are a blessing, which we believe all of these things on this channel. It all depends on God. You know, God must have first place in every Christian's life. If God does not do the work, all that is done will be in vain. True success comes from the Lord. And do you want God's blessing upon your family? You must seek to follow him, believe in his word, put his principles into practice, and trust him to do his part. And then the last part of Psalms that he was talking about in Psalms 127, 1 and 2, he lists the verses. The last part of Psalms teaches children are to be a blessing to their parents. Nowadays, most people do not believe the veracity of the scripture. Children are sometimes considered to be a pain in the neck. They seem to swallow up our money, rob us of time, and even embarrass us at every available moment or opportunity. Potential parents make statements like, I'm willing to try one child, maybe even two, but three is thinking too big. Anyone who has more than four is looking for trouble and needs to see a psychologist. One of the reasons for this statement and others like it is that Christians have swallowed the world's lie and philosophy that small families are best. People are afraid of a world that is overpopulated. They do not understand that God is in control and will supply the Christians' every need. Small families are best because a large family is too costly. This excuse could be better translated. If you have a large family, you will not be able to buy all those things that make you happy. However, joy does not come from things or people. Joy comes from the Lord. And so he goes into just excuses for small families. It's no small wonder that today's children are brats and not blessings. No wonder they are burdens instead of being a good thing. No wonder they give their parents headaches and very little or no peace of mind. And I was just talking to my son about this the other day, and he said that even in his generation, one of the things that drives him nuts is when people consider kids and large families to just be a drain on them. Like they're a bother. They act like they can't stand them. And he was talking about how, with me and his dad, we have not had that philosophy with our kids. Like we genuinely enjoy our kids. Obviously, they're going to drive us crazy at times. I'm not saying that every moment in the McMurtry household is a blissful moment, because it's not. There's stress and there's chaos and there's noise and there's training and there's discipline and all that stuff that happens. But we have always tried to do things to enjoy our family. My husband and I enjoy each other very much. We've always enjoyed each other very much. And we've always done things in our life to make memories with our kids, to enjoy our kids, to enjoy our family, to enjoy our marriage. And my son's really noticing that there's a horrible attitude regarding children. People are waiting longer and longer to have kids. Side note, I am now a Nana. If you saw it on my community post, he had his first son this week, and they are just basking in just the wonderful blessing that he already has been in the few days he's been here, not alive, because he's been alive for 9 months, but earthside, the first few days that he's been earthside, and I get to spend all next week with him. So I'm going to try to do Gently Led Sisters on Monday before I leave. We'll see if I get to it, but that might be up in the air as well. So, but he just realizes that children are a blessing, also because it took them a little over a year, about a year and a half, to get pregnant with their first child, and not knowing if they would ever be blessed. He really got annoyed at the people who consider the fact that maybe they can get pregnant easily. They just don't care, or they complain about it. That really bothered him when they did go through that year and a half of infertility. That really did bother him, seeing that attitude. And so, even at the young age of 20, what is he, 23? I think, yes, 23. He's realizing that children are a blessing, God gives, and we should have a good attitude regarding kids. So Dan Johnson says, parents must live for the Lord and trust in him to do the work if they want their children to be a blessing to them. Today's parents desperately need God to work behind the scenes, molding, changing, and rebuilding their minds, attitudes, and actions in order for them to be what they need to be for their children. What a mistake parents make when they want the Lord to change their children's lives, but they don't want him to change their lives. Malachi 4:6 says, and he shall turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. I know this reference is talking about Elijah in the future, but I believe it also contains a much neglected principle. In this directive, whose heart was Elijah to change first? The parents. If the parents do not let God change them, there will be no lasting change in the children. All right, so then he says, parents are so weak, and we are. Christian parents need the Lord because they are so weak. There is not a parent in the world who does not fail his children over and over again. Parents are not perfect. There is an old nature that is constantly warring against their new nature. And he lists Romans 7, 14, 25, the whole verse for that which I would, I do not, and all that. Paul was very aware of his weaknesses, and he knew he was in a constant struggle to win the battle over his old nature. He says, since we are all imperfect, there is no such thing as a perfect home, and there is not. We have been accused of thinking that we have a perfect home and thinking we're perfect and thinking blah, 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 blah. And McMurtry's, oh, they think they're so superior and they think they're so perfect. Well, obviously, I'm going to be biased towards my family. I think it's pretty great, but we've never said we were perfect, and we've never tried to act like we were perfect. We just love our kids, and we enjoy our family, and we're raising them for the Lord, and that fruit is being shown. Since we are all imperfect, there is no such thing as a perfect home. We will fail from time to time. One of the big secrets to success, but not being 100% successful, rather, a great secret to success is seeking forgiveness when failure comes. For without a doubt, everyone will fail at one time or another. When we fail, we need to recognize our failure for what it is and return to fellowship with God and others as soon as possible. So then he goes on. And then I put 100% next to this one, family, priority number one, because that has always been my priority in life. It's been my family, hands down. In establishing a strong spiritual relationship with the Lord, family should become the number one priority. Family should be more important than our job, even pastoring a church, and I agree. And now some people will say, they'll accuse people like us who put our family as priority. Well, you're just making it an idol. And no, we're not, because our family does not come before God or the things of the Lord. We have always kept the things of the Lord. We've always kept our relationship with God first and foremost. And we've always kept the things of the Lord first before our family. Our family just follows suit, and they do what's important to us. For example, church, coming to church on Sundays, that's like a non-negotiable in our house. So, because of that, it's become important to our children as well. And they've just followed suit. They've been with us at church every week and, conferences and revivals and soul winning and things of the Lord. And so we've always done those things. We've never let our children hinder that. So yes, if your family is taking the priority over the things of the Lord, yes, I would say it's become an idol. But when you keep the things of the Lord first, and then your family just follows in line and they follow the leadership of your husband, like they should, then that's when the priorities are in the right order. Family is more important than money, position, or fame. Long-lasting happiness comes from our family, and that's true. If my husband built a ministry and he spent 20 years building a ministry, 25 years building a ministry, and his children walk away from him and want nothing to do with him, and he's not involved in his grandkids' lives, and that right there is a huge failure. It's a huge failure. And I know my husband's heart and I know my heart, and that would devastate him if that ever happened. So because of that, we've kept our family as our top priority. Because if you gain the whole world and lose your son, you know the verse, you know how the verse goes. And then I have no greater truth, but to hear that I have no greater joy, but to hear that my children walk in truth. I'm paraphrasing, but there are verses about this in the Bible. One day we will retire from our work, but we will always have our family. One day we may not have good health, but we'll always have a family. When we get old, the memories of our family should sustain us in times of trial. Yes, I know it's possible to lose our family in an unfortunate disaster, but we'll always have them in our hearts and minds. Our thoughts will constantly be drawn back to them. Whether these thoughts and memories will be ones of joy or sadness will depend on how much of a priority we've made our family. Before entering the ministry, I decided that one emphasis of my ministry would be my family. I had heard of great men of God who enjoyed having wonderful ministries, but they lost their family. I had already mentioned that a friend of mine built a thriving, exciting church only to lose his wife to another man through neglect. Because I did not want something similar happening to my family, I chose to make my family one of the main priorities of my ministry. The conscious decision that I made to make my family an emphasis of my ministry is one of the reasons why God has given us such a wonderful family. As a grandfather, I daily praise the Lord for the wonderful family God has given to me. From the bottom of my heart, I want others to have the same kind of wonderful memories, the same kind of strong, edifying relationships, the same kind of satisfying, pleasant times I have enjoyed with my family. Parents need to make 3 basic decisions in order for their family to become a priority in their lives. Number 1, parents must dedicate their lives to try to rear their children by biblical standards and principles. Number 2, parents must dedicate their children to the Lord, giving him the right to do with them what he wants. If God wants them to be car mechanics in the neighborhood or missionaries on the other side of the world, the parents must be happy with God's choice. And I'm going to interject here too. I know for my family and I know a lot of ministry families will place emphasis on the sons being in the ministry. We've never done that with our sons, and our sons have not felt the need or the desire to go into full-time ministry, which every layman can be a full-time Christian and, whatever. But I'm talking about like a paid position on staff at a church. And while, even if they eventually make a career choice that I'm not exactly ecstatic about, I'm going to support them in whatever they do as long as they're serving the Lord, and that's whether they're a layman, whether they're, I don't know, whatever they do, whether they're a carpenter or a welder. Tommy's a welder right now, whether they are into plumbing or whether they're an assistant pastor or a missionary, whatever they decide to do, I'm going to support them in that. Parents are rearing their children for the Lord, not themselves. And then number 3, parents must determine to live the best they can for the Lord and to learn all they can about rearing their children for the Lord. Now, obviously, there are some hard implications with this. Choosing to make these decisions will have some hard implications, including a sacrifice of time, of money, a deep desire to do God's will, not their own, a deep sense of the importance of being a good example, a strong willingness to be constantly polished and molded by the Lord, a humbleness and readiness to ask for forgiveness of wrongdoing. And then raising a successful family is a spiritual matter, not just practical matters. A married couple can read all the numerous books on marriage and attend all the conferences, but if they're not relying on God to do the work, every sacrifice will be in vain. Okay, so number 2, the chapter number 2 is one of the most important in the entire book, I believe, and that is winning and keeping your children's hearts. And he hits on this forgotten principle, the forgotten principle, and the most important principle when it comes to raising children. And I think this is it before we get into anything else. This is what you need to get a hold of. And especially, a lot of men don't read. A lot of men don't watch my channel, and I would feel awkward if they did, because this channel is definitely designed. I don't want to teach men, obviously. And this channel is designed for women, Christian wives, Christian moms, all that stuff. But I have heard that some do. So I do think as wives do, we can pray for our husbands to be strong in this area. But the forgotten principle is aimed towards men. And the father does bear a lot of the responsibility and a lot of the weight of raising a good family. Everything rises and falls on leadership. And oftentimes, yes, if there is a failure, it is the leader's fault. And that's just, you can see that in history. Even when it comes to like political things, you can see that in the Bible. A lot of things rose and fell on leadership. And obviously, unless it's the Lord, there's no perfect leader and there's no perfect father either. But I think men need to step up and take responsibility, because the main principle and the main thing that God reiterates in his word is aimed and directed at fathers. So what is it? He says, I have been appalled over the years at the lack of understanding as to what is the most important ingredient in rearing children. I no longer wonder why family after family loses their children to the devil. If parents do not know what is most important about rearing their children, how can they expect to train their children in the way they should go and thus see them not forsake God's way? Then again, if parents do know what is most important but fail to put it into practice, the results will be the same. I have asked many pastors and missionaries the same questions, and I can count on one hand the number of people who have answered all 4 of the following questions correctly. And these are the questions that he gives them. Number 1, according to both Ephesians 6 and Colossians 3, what is the main responsibility of the wife in relationship to the husband? Everyone gets this one, including your over-the-top, crazy, hardcore people. Answer. Almost everyone answers correctly. Submit. Easy peasy, right? Question number 2. What is the main responsibility of the husband to the wife? Love and cherish, right? That is the correct answer. Question number 3. What is the main responsibility of the children to their parents? Answer. They should obey their parents. Very good. Now for the hard question. Question number 4. This is the one that almost everyone gets wrong. What is the main responsibility of the parents to their children? Answer. And I receive a myriad of them. Let me see. Well, is it that we should train them? No. Oh, it must be to teach them. No. Oh, I know now. It's to educate them in the way of the Lord. No. I give up. What is it? Both Ephesians 6:4 and Colossians 3:21 contain the answer to the question, what is the main responsibility of the parents to their children? Ephesians 6:4 says, and ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Colossians 3:21 says, fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they be discouraged. Did you notice the admonition that's mentioned in each of these two scriptures? Both verses use almost the same exact phrasing. Provoke not your children to wrath. Do you see the phrase now? The most important thing parents can do is not to provoke their children to wrath. This thought is repeated twice. And anytime, this is my own thoughts, but anytime the Bible repeats something, pay attention because it's important. While I was growing up, I personally cannot remember ever hearing a preacher tell me that this was the most important thing that parents should do in relation to their children. I had heard it mentioned, but the emphasis was always on bringing them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. So he goes into, and I think this is the key to the book, what does provoking your children to wrath mean? How could it be that so little emphasis has been given in preaching to not provoking your children to wrath? I guess most people really have no clue as to what this biblical phrase means. Could this be the reason why so many pastors, missionaries, and laymen have lost their children to the world? Having no clue to its importance and not really understanding what provoking your children means, fathers and mothers have provoked their children to wrath over and over again, without a minute's worry as to the fact that it could cost them their children. I think some preachers have been afraid to put much emphasis on the subject because they were afraid it might be perceived as bowing down to their children's every wish. And I've actually heard that preached. However, this biblical concept does not mean that. Might it mean we can only spank our children when they want us to? Surely if a parent spanks his child and he does not like it, the child will get angry at his parent. No, that is not the meaning of the scripture either. So what does this scripture mean? It means that our treatment of our children should be done, that their spirits are not hurt. And it's the spirit. It's the spirit behind it. If I could just get that across to everyone, it's the spirit. And this guy nails it. Parents are not to wound a child's spirit, to break off fellowship, or to offend him through injustice on their part. To provoke or stir up a child is to cause the child to become exasperated, angry, or wrathful towards us. This provoking has nothing to do with child's not liking something or they're having a temper tantrum so they can get their way. I'm not addressing a child's reflex reaction to getting angry because he cannot have his own way. Rather, I am referring to a lingering, undying anger that is the result of a real offense. God says chastening is unpleasant. Now, no chastening for the present seem to be joyous, but grievous. Hebrews 12:11. Not liking something or even being grieved is not the same as being provoked to wrath. The former is directed at the event. The latter is personally directed towards parents. When parents provoke their children to wrath, the distance or rift is created between them. The distance is very personal. So provoking to wrath has been expressed in many ways. A wounded or broken spirit, a broken line of communication, a closed door of communication, a closed spirit, a loss of the child's heart. He talks about how his parents kept his heart. So it is of great importance that we realize how important keeping their heart is. Why is it important that parents not provoke their children to anger? Provoking children to anger shuts the doors of communication. Provoking children to anger separates and distances the child from his parents. If a child's wound is deep, he will probably choose friends who are the opposite of the type his parents would want him to choose. He may verbally abuse or use disrespectful words towards his parents. A child's heart cut off from his parents is the main cause for drug and alcohol use, as well as the main reason for a young person's sexual permissiveness. In the reading, research, and personal experience of a noted child psychiatrist, Dr. Ross Campbell, he has never found a sexually disoriented child who had a warm, loving, and affectionate father. Isn't that crazy. If you look at some of this research, it backs up what he's saying. In the worst of cases, a child with a wounded spirit can completely shut out his parents, run away from home, suffer with profound depression, and seek escape by committing suicide. And sadly, that does happen. And the parents are just completely blind to the problems that they caused. He says, did I ever provoke my children to wrath? Yes, I did. But I was very fortunate to have a wonderfully sensitive wife who could see when I had done something to provoke them to wrath. And I want to say, this is why the family unit is so wonderful. This is why God designed it with a father and a mother, because there are times I am very in tune to my children and their hearts and their spirit. And oftentimes my husband's clueless because men weren't built that way. Men weren't built to, be in tune with like all these feelings and emotions and different things like that. So I can tell when there's a problem with a child's heart. And I'll often say, you need to be careful. That was a little harsh. Like I could tell, I can see it in my children's face if dad tends to start getting a little too harsh. And that could even be with his words. And thankfully, my husband, through the years, I have shown him that I have good intuition. I have a good gut. I have, I'm able to sense things that he's not able to, and he trusts me now. And so he trusts my discernment when it comes to different things, especially with the children. And that is why we need both a father and a mother. Sometimes we do need the sternness of the father, but then we need the mother to be balancing that and to be kind of the compass and, kind of the one that feels the temperature in the home and can see her child's heart and see her child's spirit. So that is why both are needed in the relationship. So she would come to me in private. And that's another thing too. Everything when it comes to disapproval in how something is handled, it should not be just like, fought about in front of the kids. Anytime I've ever had an issue, I come to my husband privately. There are ways to approach your husband in a way that you're not putting him down in front of the kids. You're not disrespecting him to the kids, but in a way to bring awareness, maybe to, something that he needs to be aware of. So making it right is the secret of healing a broken relationship he talks about. So how do I do it? You might be asking, have I provoked my children to wrath? How do parents really provoke a child to wrath? And I love how he goes into wrong discipline, because if every young parent could just get the heart behind this and the spirit behind this when it comes to disciplining and training your children, it would heal and preserve so many relationships, so many of those child-parent relationships. So I define wrong discipline as trying to change or correct a child in the wrong way. The following are examples of what I believe picture wrong discipline. And then he lists a whole bunch of them. I'm not going to go through all of them, but some of them are, punishing for something that was already addressed, disciplining with anger or harshness, disciplining without explaining or clarifying, using brute force to get your way, punishing for the child for something he didn't do, pressuring him when he's not feeling well or is hurt, causing him to be bitter, forcing him to talk when he's inwardly hurt, yelling at him when he knows he already did wrong. And then wrong love, I define wrong love as a parent's failure to show their children they love them. And this is so important. The following list contains example of what I define as wrong love. It's a huge, long list. Some of them are never telling him I love you, never showing physical affection, being disinterested in the child, treating the child as if all he does is just his duty and failing to show appreciation for him, making him feel like a nobody, lifting him up and then humiliating him, not being interested in who he is. I mean, there's huge. And I listed this all actually on my Facebook. I did a post about this and I put all of these. I went through and wrote down everything. It took me a long time to do this post, but it's a very good post. I also put it in the Gently Led Sisters group on Facebook if you want to join that. Comparing him with others, showing how they are so much better, always stating you wish he were better, treating him as a little kid, making him earn your approval, behaving as if what he desires is of little importance, making him believe he's not important, rarely touching or hugging him, failing to give him the love and attention he needs. Huge long list, even more than that. Wrong attitude. I define wrong attitude as having a bad attitude in general. The following are examples of wrong attitudes: speaking without thinking, being insensitive to his feelings, using harsh words, being too busy to listen to him, being a dictator, agitating him often. Wrong example. I define a wrong example as not being what you should be, not him, what you should be. Not keeping your promises, being inconsistent, failing to treat him as others, failing to treat him or others as a Christian should, making him do what you say, not what you do, always complaining about him, fighting with your spouse, causing undue hurt and anger, always belittling your spouse, especially in the presence of guests, failing to learn to control your anger, doing something both you and your child knows is wrong, such as smoking, drinking, cursing, and so forth. Someone said, how can I balance trusting my husband leading our family with knowing when to speak to him and reveal what I believe needs change or effort? We haven't been married super long. I don't want to nag him. I'm going to say at the beginning of your marriage, it is definitely different. Obviously, it's going to look different for you than it does for me after almost a quarter of a century being married, after almost 25 years. Okay, so it's going to look a little different for you. You are both going to have to learn how to trust each other. My husband has more trust in me now and my intuition and my heart now than he did the first year of marriage, let's say, or the second year of marriage, the third year of marriage. I think you both need to be on the same page with methodology and, okay, like, what are our absolutes, right? So this disobedience, we're always going to correct. Lying, we're always going to correct. Back talking, we're always going to correct. How are we going to correct it? Is it, and then kind of have a constant, okay? So maybe, we're going to spank for this offense. It's going to be 2 swats. We're going to spank this one, lying's worse. It's going to be 4 swats or whatever. Have a constant so that you have some ground rules for your family that you're not going to cross. So even if you feel the anger welling up, you might need to separate yourself from the situation just to get it under control and then stick to the plan, stick to the guidelines that you've put in your family. So maybe have a discussion with him about that. What are some guidelines? How are we going to discipline our kids? What if they're overtired and they were up half the night before? This just happened with Hannah a week ago, and she's having a really hard day regulating her emotions. It's probably not that she needs to be spanked. She's not being defiant on purpose. She could just need more snuggles that day. She could need a nap. She could need some downtime. She could need some alone time. There are more tools in our toolbox than just resorting to that. I feel like parents think that they're going to raise these awesome kids as long as they just spank, spank, spank. That's all they do. They don't see the spirit behind it. They don't see the heart behind it. They end up going overboard with it. And then they raise very angry, bitter children who just want to escape as soon as they turn 18, sometimes before they turn 18. So you have to really watch and regulate the spirit in your home and the spirit behind it. And, you should be able to bring something up one time, talk about it, and not constantly nag him. I don't like when people nag me. I'm not going to nag my husband constantly about the same thing. So hopefully that helps. But okay, so now that I've established many of the ways parents often provoke their children to wrath, how can I know if I've provoked my child to wrath? If I indeed have provoked my child to wrath, how can I make things right afterwards? I think this is a good key too. I maintain that it's quite easy for parents to recognize when they've provoked their children to wrath. And you know what? If you're a parent who loves your child in any way, you're going to know deep down in your spirit. You're going to know in your stomach. That gut feeling where you think you might have crossed the line, you might have gone a little too far, and you might have said some really harsh things that were not necessary. You know it. When a child is provoked to wrath, he closets himself away from his parents. He does not like his parents. He does not want to be near them, interact with them, or talk to them. He resists all parental attempts to reach out and touch him. When a child resists his parents' attempts to be affectionate, he has strongly indicated his spirit has been wounded. A provoked child is placid or indifferent, stiff and unresponsive to any display of affection by a parent. He'll turn his back to his parents. He'll remove himself from affection. He does not want to talk or interact with his parents in any way. It's part of the nature of children to be loving and to want affection. Children do not need to be taught to be affectionate, although it's sometimes good to show them how to express their affection. If a child is not affectionate, generally it's because he has a provoked spirit or he's sick. And I've seen that. Every child wants a parent to love them. Every child, they yearn for a relationship with their parents. And if that's not there, it's because there's something wrong. There's a wounded spirit. There's, hurt or bitterness that hasn't been addressed. So he says, what should you do? Check your attitude, soften your attitude, and confess your guilt to the offended child. Find the reason for, and I'm just listing these off. He has a whole paragraph underneath each of these. Find out the reason for and the depth of his hurt. Express your regret for hurting your child. Ask your child's forgiveness and reach out with a warm touch. So what if the child does not want to forgive? It might be that the hurt from the offense is deeper than originally thought. Okay, so then he kind of goes through that. And then he has a practical evaluation. And I really like this. So I'm just going to say, my son scored a 5 on almost all these. Like my relationship, my oldest son and I are very close. I'm close with all my kids. I have a relationship with all my kids, but he loves his parents very much. And I got to be there when my grandson was born. And it was one of the, oh my goodness, like the 8 best moments of my life outside of salvation have been when they placed my baby on my chest. And I just had number 9. And that was when I saw my grandson take his first breaths. Oh my goodness, that was amazing. But anyways, he scored on 5, except for the question, the friends of my son are those whom I would choose for him. I don't like a couple of his friends. And that's all. They're Christian guys. They're Christian guys. I just don't jive with their personalities. Maybe it's just the whole generational thing. I can say overall, I mean, they are Christian guys. They are in church and serving the Lord. So I should be happy with that. But I'm just saying, like, personality wise, it's the only thing he scored lower on. But my son, 2 years of age of older, and then you give numbers, never, rarely, sometimes, normally, always. My son likes to be touched, 5. I hug my son all the time, touch his arm all the time, whatever. My son touches me spontaneously as soon as he comes home from school. My son respects what I respect in life. 5, always for mine. In general, my son appreciates that which I value in life. 5. The friends of my son are those whom I would choose for him. My son wears clothing and a hairstyle which I approve. 5. The activity my son chooses are ones I would also choose for him. 5, with the exception of if he ever skydives, then I will score him lower. The music to which my son listens to reflects that which I approve. He listens to like college group music, as far as I know. My son likes to talk with me. 5. In general, my son agrees with my opinions. 5. My son likes to be with me. 5. Normally, my son obeys me. 5. And he still is just trying to be a good Christian. And you should, I can't even describe what it's like to watch your son become a father. And just to see the husband that he was to my daughter-in-law through the whole delivery process. I mean, he was right there with her since Tommy 4 has been born. He's not left the hospital one time. He does not want to leave his wife's side. He does not want to leave his son's side. And to see the amount of love and to see his tears as Jenna was in pain. And she did everything all natural, so no pain meds. And to see him stroking her head and like giving her cold wash gloves and letting her lean on him, and to see the joy when his son was born and just how he didn't even want any of us to hold him because he just wanted to hold him the whole time. And it's amazing to see that come full circle. And he now knows the depth of love that I have for him. And it's pretty crazy. Oh, it's amazing. In general, my son shows affection for me, and my son appears to look me in the eyes naturally. So that's just something. And, change my son for my daughter and then score it. So you can kind of know. And then it says 14 to 20, if you score low, if he like never is like that or rarely or whatever, danger, resolve issues immediately. 21 to 30, attention, proceed with caution. 31 to 40, careful, holes in the road. 41 to 50, might be some hiccups, but everything's good. 51 to 70, end of construction, drive carefully. And that's where I'm at right now. So when you reach this part, when you have adult kids who still love you, want a relationship with you, are in church, agree with most of your opinions and beliefs, and that's when you've done it, right? So then he talks about reopening their heart and reviving their spirit if they've closed off their heart to you. So parents must develop a good relationship. The most important single thing, get a hold of this, okay? Because this is, I emphasize this over and over and over again in the last 7 years or however long I've had this channel. The most important single thing you can do to guarantee success in rearing your children is to develop a good relationship with them and to maintain open doors of communication. Accomplishing this goal takes time, dedication, and the humility to ask for forgiveness when you blow it, but I can guarantee you will never regret it. Guys, the blessings are going to be 100-fold. if you raise children who like you and love you and want a relationship with you and let you be involved in your grandkids' lives. There are so many young people just cutting off relationships because it's not worth the pain and the anguish of working through those things. And it's a shame. They should be willing to kind of work through that. But as parents, we need to make it easier on our kids. We need to make it easy on our kids to have a good relationship with us. We need to keep those open lines of communication, and we need to do heart checks and spirit checks and make sure everything's good between us and there's no bitterness and there's no anger. And if there is, we ask for forgiveness and we resolve those things. We got to keep those open lines of communication. Parents must develop a close relationship with their children. When parents have their children's hearts, those children will more readily be obedient to their parents and will most likely follow their example. By keeping the doors of communication open, there will be a greater possibility they will also open their hearts to the Lord. If you've developed the habit of asking forgiveness and you make a mistake and do not realize you provoked your children to wrath, they will probably forgive you anyways and not hold it against you. If you have a good relationship with your children, they are most likely to come back if they ever do begin to wander away. And I've seen that too. People that have had prodigal sons, they try to keep that, they have a good relationship. Their children do eventually end up finding their way back. So almost about everything that parents do is related to the problem of provoking to wrath. The next chapter will deal with the 4 areas most critical in provoking and not provoking children to wrath. Parents simply cannot afford to make any mistakes in these areas, and I completely agree. So then he goes into the right discipline. Discipline with love. Parents should be in agreement about discipline, which is kind of what I was talking about with the commenter. You know, parents should not be afraid to use the rod in love. Agree on what misbehaviors will be punished with the rod. And this is what I was talking about. Not everything, you don't need to go to that instantly for everything, you know. And he said in our home, disobedience was the offense we felt needed to be punished with the rod. I'm not saying ours is the only way to go. For example, the danger of fire was great on the Bill Rice Ranch. I guess they were involved in that. And the ranch was quite far from the nearest fire department. For these reasons, Bill Rice established a policy that playing with matches would be punished by using the rod. Other parents have included lying and stealing as part of their reasons to use the rod. I think for me, the big one in my house is lying. I don't like lying. I'm not a liar, and I don't like it when people lie to me. And I'm very honest with the truth. So that honesty is super important to me. That's one of my priorities. I want honest children. So lying was a big one in our house. Disobedience was a big one because especially when they're little, they need to learn to stop when you say stop, because that could save their life. If they're getting ready to run across a road, if they're getting ready to do something dangerous, they need to learn to listen to mom's voice. So those were big ones in my house. So yeah, parents should not be afraid to use the rod in love. And then he lists all the biblical reasons, which, you know, obviously on this channel, I do agree. And the rod of correction, if you want to call it that way, and moderation. But he talks about not disciplining in anger too. And if you're not disciplining in anger, you don't have a chance of being abusive. It's the ones that are lashing out in anger and frustration that go overboard and they become abusive. So he goes into all that. Obedience is to be immediate. This is your goal. Parents should be consistent in their discipline. Parents should discipline in private whenever possible. It should be very private and personal, just between the offender and the offended. Correction should not be to embarrass a child, to shame him in front of others, to show others who is boss, or to demonstrate a parent's lack of self-control. And I do think this whole shaming thing, I've observed parents that have gone on to have children that are very bitter and angry at them. I've observed them shaming them in public with their words, putting them down, cutting them down, saying really mean things to them. And when I saw it happen, I cringed so badly inside. And it was not a surprise to me when years later down the road, that child no longer speaks to their parents. They no longer have a relationship with their parents. And it's just, there was so much hurt there. And the parent just shamed them so much and put them down so many times in front of others. It created a lot of bitterness in that relationship. So, and then he goes into how to spank your child. And I mean, obviously, I can say overall, I agree with about 90% of this book. Obviously, there's going to be a couple little things here and there I don't agree with. But I think for those of you who were not raised in a home where this was implemented, Or maybe you were raised in a home where they went completely crazy with this. They went overboard. They had no clue what they were doing, right? And they went overboard. And because of that, you bear some like emotional scars from that. And you're like, no, you want to be biblical in the sense of how you raise your children, but you also don't ever want to cross the line and do what your parents did. So you have no idea, how do I do this? Where do I start? How do I do this in a biblical way? Right. So he kind of outlines some things, send to the room, get control of yourself, which I've always stated that. Get control of your emotions. You must not spank in anger because you do not want to provoke your child to wrath. I completely agree with that. When you do the right thing in the wrong way, you'll provoke your child to wrath. Show tenderness. I like that. Verify the offense. Okay. And then he talks about just the logistics of it. Allow no scenes, love him, pray together, and then get happy. So it always ends on a positive note when he disciplined his children. And then he goes into how not to spank your child. Yell at your child, but never do anything about it. Yell until you get so angry you have to spank him. Make fun of him. Get angry when he does something childish, like spilling the milk, falling down and soiling his Sunday clothes, or eating dirt. And I'm glad he put that in there, because nothing drives me nuts more than if I see a child being a child and they have an accident and the parent spanks them. Like, they're just being a child. Let them be a child. I'm going to say, if you go over, and this is what I talk about, over the top stuff, when you are spanking your child for just being a child, spilling the milk, falling down, getting dirt on his Sunday clothes, tearing his Sunday clothes by accident because he's playing, eating dirt, stuff like that. That's what I talk about, over the top stuff, where you're just doing it out of your own frustration, because now, oh no, I have to clean his clothes. Oh, now I have to clean up this mess of spilt milk. You're taking your frustration out on that child when they're just being a kid. Just leave them alone. Don't spank him for that. That's really over the top. Slap him hard against the side of his head, grab him by the arm and jerk him around. Spank softly and seldom. Pick up the child and hold him close so he does not touch any off-limits item. Yes, he needs to learn to control himself. Not that might makes. Oh, not that might makes right. I get it. I understand what he's saying there. Then he talks about the need for boundaries. So how do parents build these walls of boundaries? They start by teaching their child no. He had something interesting in here, which I liked, because I've done this in my own life with my own children. I didn't know anyone else did it. And I know I've heard some over the top preachers like, don't ever do this. But he's pretty good when it comes to explaining like the whole process, and, these are the consequences we have. So overall, I agree with his method to correct discipline. But he says the count to 3 method. I used this method of discipline when I felt the child was thinking about doing right, but he was not quite sure he wanted to do it the right way. For example, I might tell my son, come here. He would stop what he was doing, look at me, but not come. His little mind was no doubt thinking, do I really have to do this? I would immediately then start counting to 3. 1, 2, 3. If I reached 3 and he made no effort to obey, I spanked the child. Even if he started to come after 3, he was still spanked. I would use this method when I wanted to give him an opportunity to obey. By counting to 3, I was trying to insert a little of the soft side of love, which I like, because he focuses a lot on, showing grace and being soft with your kids, yet being firm and requiring him to obey. I know that I know the child was not immediately obedient, but it was very close. So in this, once again, I like that he was giving his child an opportunity to obey, because oftentimes kids they kind of need a little grace, in their life. So I was kind of surprised he put that in there, but and then he goes into, what not to do, allowing the child to run away from you, overprotecting the child, allowing your child to run wild, allowing your child to pout. So, and then the summary is, the following are what I consider to be the most important principles to learn about discipline. Be consistent. Don't use your hand unless absolutely necessary. Do not discipline unless the child knows and understands why, and do not discipline it in anger. And then he talks about the right love. How parents can show their children they love them. Let them hear you say to one another, I love you. And this has a lot of this has to do with your children should see that you love your spouse. And I'm going to say a good marriage relationship is foundational to raising good children. It makes them feel very safe. It makes them feel very secure. He said, I once read that if a husband had to choose between loving his wife or loving his children, he should choose to love his wife. I'm glad I do not have to choose between them, but the emphasis is very valuable. If parents want their children to get married and have happy homes, they are the ones who must show their children how to have a happy home. Parents need to be examples of what God expects in the home. Many people want a happy home, but haven't the slightest idea what one really is. The only replica most have seen is what television portrays. But Hollywood's image is far from being true. In reality, it's a poor imitation. Sometimes it's frustrating to teach on the home because some people have never seen an example of what the teacher is saying. After all, many have never really even seen a happy home. For example, when I tell someone not to discipline in anger, that person has no idea how to be disciplined in any other way. It's never been replicated to them. They've only ever seen someone disciplining in anger. For children to have security, a vision for the future, and a sense of self-worth, they need to have parents who love one another. Parents who love each other are demonstrating a form of loving their children. The parent is joining his children in loving someone the children also love. So it goes into all the ways you can show your wife or your spouse how to love her. Help one another, praise and compliment your spouse. Don't let your children see you arguing or angry at one another. If by chance a disagreement arises, be sure your children see you ask one another for forgiveness and be sure that they see forgiveness was given. So, yep. Pray for God's help and grace. Have a set time when you talk about things that have hurt you. Learn to express your dislike without condemning your spouse. Every Christian must learn to hate sin while also loving the sinner. This biblical principle certainly applies to every couple's desire to maintain peace at home and successfully resolve their differences. Couples need to express their hurts without hurting each other. And I'm going to tell you, words do hurt. And you can say very foolish things with your mouth. And you can either build up your house or tear your house down with your tongue. And be very, very careful in how you talk to your spouse. Learn to listen. Learn to communicate honestly. Have good times. Let them see you love them. Then he goes into a big thing on Family Day, which we do family activities all the time. So he goes into some of his favorites of his kids that they've done throughout the years. Take vacations. He stresses the importance of taking vacations together, show an interest in their interests, be interested in what they're interested in. And then the 5th chapter is the right attitude. Don't be critical. If you want to keep the hearts of your children, you must have the right attitude toward God, towards man, and towards life circumstances. Okay, so don't be critical. Don't be critical toward your kids. Don't be critical towards other people. Don't be critical towards other pastors. Don't be critical towards anything, people in church, you know. If parents are not careful, they can give the impression that no one does right and no one can be trusted. These parents can give the impression that no one is as good as they are, but their children see their defects and know their parents' weaknesses. As a matter of fact, in many ways, children know their parents are worse than those whom they are criticizing. As a result, parents destroy their children's confidence in others as they tear down those around them. And what's the effect? The children do not see any advantage to being a Christian. After all, everyone's doing wrong, especially those in authority. Many parents do not teach their children to accept the problems and difficulties of life. They don't teach them to be submissive to authority. Instead, they teach their children that God is mean to let these problems and difficulties happen, and God's not in control, and there is no happiness in life. Neither have these parents taught their children how to control their feelings. So then he goes into personal testimonies about doing your best, and then, life is an adventure. That's one thing my kids have learned from their dad. It's life is an adventure. Pray that they do God's will. Our prayer and heart's desire was our children would do God's will in their lives. What God wanted them to become was not our choice. That choice was up to the Lord. I never prayed God would put them in full-time ministry or make them missionaries. Those decisions were up to the Lord, for I know he loves them dearly and he knows them the best. So tell them it's a privilege to be a missionary kid or a pastor's kid. And I agree with this wholeheartedly. I have seen lots of bitter pastors' kids, and there's a couple of reasons for this. One, the parents were overly critical of everyone in their church, and so they only focused on the negatives of being in ministry. They only focused on the times when they were hurt, when they were stabbed in the back, when people were mean to them, or people talked about them. they talked about it constantly, and that's all their children took from it. They didn't talk about the blessings. They didn't talk about everything that the people in the church did to help them, or, whatever it is. So, let's see. Many times I would say to our kids, being an MK, missionary kid, sure has its advantages. I know that there are some disadvantages, but the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. Do you know of anyone who's seen as much of the United States of America as you have? How many kids have visited as many fun places as you have? And I tell my kids that too, because my husband does travel sometimes to speak. Oftentimes he'll take a kid along with him. That's one-on-one time that they get. They get to see states that they've never seen. And there's so many blessings to being a pastor's kid. So yeah. And then the sixth chapter, the fourth pillar in the last chapter of the book, is the right example. And I like this because it all comes down to us. Everything rises and falls on leadership, and I firmly believe that. Parents who expect their children to serve the Lord must serve the Lord. Parents who expect their children to love others must love others. Parents who want their children to have a positive attitude in life must have a positive life. And he's talking about his parents did. Parents who want their children to edify others and not criticize others must be the right example in all of these. We cannot expect our children to be something that we are not ourselves. And I think we all want our children to be better than us. I know I do. So we need to provide the right example. The example of right discipline and love. Show them you love them. Love each other. Serve God. And then examples of the right attitude. Don't be critical. The main problem in today's churches is bitterness. Having a bitter spirit can lead to all kinds of wrongful actions, including anger, criticism, vengeance, and pornography. Wow. The escalation. Parents who want their children to live in harmony with others need to set the correct example. Children will need to understand how their parents overcome offenses and misunderstandings. Do your best. And then think to yourself, what is expected of your children? Do I require more of them than others? Do I live by a double standard? Do I expect more of my children than I do of others because of their upbringing? If your answer to these three questions is yes, you may be guilty of treating them differently than others. So then he talks about some personal things in his life, respect authority. And then he's like, I have tried to teach my children, and I also have done this with my own, to agree to disagree agreeably with others. If we have a disagreement with a church that is too large an issue, then the answer is to leave quietly without making problems. We must find a different place to serve. Parents who disobey authority or criticize authority are not presenting a good example to their children. These parents may be unconsciously be teaching their children to be rebels against their parents' authority, against the authority of others. When children feel they cannot trust their pastor, their parents have probably deprived them of vital counsel that could change their lives for the good. For these reasons, parents need to be very careful that they are good examples in respecting authority, both in action and in words. And then make life an adventure. Parents, do you suffer from self-pity when things don't go the way you like them to go? Do you complain when the car breaks down, or do you make it into an adventure? Do your children see that you accept the problems sent your way? Do you get a laugh out of things that go against your best laid plans? And then he tells a story about when they had some car trouble. And he ends with make life an adventure. So in conclusion, be an example of a Christian who loves, who rolls with the punches, who grows constantly in the Lord, and one who knows he is not perfect, but is trying to do better. Parents, be what you want your children to be. Parents, if we will set the right example, our children might just surprise us and become much better than we were or are. At least, I am pleased to say this outcome is exactly what has happened with our children. And this man has lived it. He has produced the fruit that I myself want. And he nails everything so good in this book. Now, I think you can find it on his website. This little book, I think, is like $10 or something. If you go to Dan and Jerry, and his wife is spelled Gerri. So Dan and Jerry Johnson. If you Google that, missionary, Dan and Jerry Johnson, his website will come up, and this little booklet is on there. I believe there's also a book on there that his daughter wrote. I might be mistaken, or daughter-in-law. Daughter or daughter-in-law wrote on there as well. But this little book, I think, is probably hands down the best book I've ever read on child rearing, because it focuses so much on having your children's hearts, and the right spirit between all of this. And also it focuses on the biggest commandment given to parents, which is fathers provoke not your children to wrath. And the Bible emphasizes that a couple times. So it's very, very important to follow. I would recommend that every young Christian couple gets this book and reads it together, goes through, marks it up, reads the verses, tries to implement what it is. And this has even helped me even recently, just be better at communicating, be better at communicating, making sure that my kids know I appreciate you and I love you. And I tell my kids I love them every single day. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't talk to my adult kids, or, I don't tell them I love them or whatever. But just even in navigating things that come up in life, it's helped me really just be honest with my kids when I need to, but temper that honesty with love. So it's already helped me in the way that I communicate with my kids. I can see that it's making communication better, making communication stronger. And I talk to my kids from the time they're born. I'm talking to them. I'm a yapper. I talk to my kids constantly. And I treat my younger kids like they know what I'm talking about. My 4-year-old and my 6-year-old, I teach them life lessons already. I have been since they were 1. I have been since they were born. And I'm just trying to communicate with them the better they get. And you start that with them when they're young, and when they're older, they're going to come to you and they're going to talk to you about stuff. If you don't freak out when they come to you with problems, they're going to keep coming to you with problems. But if you just freak out and bring down the hammer and overreact and go over the top with stuff and come out with harsh discipline when maybe just a listening ear and a hug is all that's needed at that time, you're going to suffer the repercussions of that. You're going to have a kid who closes himself off from you, who won't talk to you, who becomes bitter, who becomes angry, who can't wait to leave your home. So I definitely think this is a must-have for anyone raising kids, anyone that's in the trenches of raising kids, and even for people like me that have older kids. It can definitely help. I wish he would write one on being like an in-law, because I'm navigating that now for the first time, having in-law kids. And I mean, so far so good. I have a great relationship with both daughter-in-laws. And I mean, the fact that my daughter-in-law was comfortable having me in there when my grandson was born, and just seeing what an amazing woman she was going through that and how strong she was. And then her and my son's love, it's been an incredible week. And believe me, when you get to this point in life, you can look back and you can see that every heartache and every toil and every trial and everything that you poured into your husband and your kids was worth it. These people that are getting divorced after 2, 3, 4 years of marriage, they don't have the long-term goal in mind. And those first 5 years of marriage are rough. But if you have it in your mind that this is for life, so we have to figure out these problems, right? We have to work through this. We have to get through this. And I'm not talking about abuse situations, because my stance on that. I'm talking about normal marriages that just have the normal run-of-the-mill problems, right? If you keep it in your mind, the day you get married, this is for life. This is for life. This is till death do us part. We got to work through these problems. You work through those first 5 years, and then you work through the first 10 and the first 15 and the first 20. And then your kids start marrying other godly spouses, and they start having a family, and they start bringing them up in church and loving them and, not provoking them. Right. And you see it come full circle. It's literally all the dreams coming true, all the goals coming to fruition, like everything good happening. So just keep that in mind. All right. And I definitely think this would help you on your journey. It just reiterates what the Bible says about not provoking to wrath. It really gets down to the nitty-gritty heart of the matter, the spirit of the matter, and just really keeping and having your children's hearts. And that's why I loved this book. It was an amazing book. And it's been an amazing week. And it's an amazing life. So go love God. Go love your husbands. Go love your children. And love them well this week. And hopefully I will see you next Monday.